Welcome to the Enabling Buying Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Kirch, and I'm grateful you're here. Enabling Buying is brought to you by Collavia.com, your all-in-one sales enablement platform. Now, we launched this show because we see that selling has become harder than ever. Buyers are overwhelmed with messages, distractions, and competing voices. In a marketplace filled with noise, the old approach of pushing products and pitching features, it simply isn't enough. When I think about enabling buying, it's about drawing customers to you. How we engage and earn trust, it's critical. Two of the most impactful ways are primal in nature. Asking questions allows us to uncover needs, and if done right, it really shows us that we can become a trusted solution provider because we understand their struggles and we can provide the solutions that matter. The other primal trigger that comes to mind is the art of storytelling. From personal engaging stories to a brand story that is meaningful and differentiated, there's no better way to attract than the power of a story that buyers can relate to. Stories can drive a deep connection that draws recipients to you like a magnet. Today's guest is a master of brand story, but he's also a leadership consultant who understands the struggles and opportunities that companies face today. Thom Van Dycke spent nearly 2 decades in pastoral leadership before he started diagnosing companies for a living. Today, he's the founder of Van Dycke, where he works with founder-led service companies that hit a wall that they can't out-hustle. Now, his specialty is naming those things that nobody wants to say out loud and then building the architecture that actually fixes it. On a personal note, Tom's also an incredible human being who knows how to set priorities that leave a lasting impact. Tom's from Manitoba, Canada, and he and his wife, Tara, have 7 kids, 2 from birth and 5 through foster care and adoption. He's even blessed to have a grandson in the mix. Now, his foster parenting, it's part of a bigger vision for making an impact. He's an advocate for helping kids from hard places to live up to their God-given potential. Join me in welcoming Thom Van Dycke to the Enabling Buying Podcast. Hey, Tom, welcome to the Enabling Buying Podcast. So great to see you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It is great to be here.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. And listen, you've been doing some amazing work. I first met you when I thought your area of focus was brand story, and it was. You were doing a lot of work around that. But you and I've talked about that over the last couple of years, and you said, listen, brand story is part of what I do, but it's part of this bigger picture. And so you serve clients from a really interesting angle, really kind of focusing on a lot of different areas. And enabling buying is really more centered on the selling side of the business. And one of the things that you and I have talked about, that you believe that salespeople today, they're not necessarily pushing and selling, they're diagnosing. They're really trying to understand what the client is going through. And I think that's such a powerful distinction. I think so many salespeople are out there still selling features and benefits, but they're struggling with that because buyers are buying from an emotional place and we're selling from a logical place. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the good salespeople have figured this out already. In fact, I think probably the best salespeople have known this for a long time. Um, but you need to be able to invite your prospects into a storyline that they understand. And it needs to talk about transformation, and it needs to hit them at an emotional place. In a product ladder, you can talk about what are the features of this thing, then you can talk about the benefits of the thing, but people are buying the transformation, which is the highest level. And if you only ever talk about the features and the benefits, it's just not going to be as impacting as if you learn to speak about the transformation. And so you it's really in the transformation that you're showing people what the real problem is anyways. You're speaking to what the real problem is.
It's an interesting. I do agree with you that I think most salespeople that are worth their weight in salt know this. A lot of them really, if you sit and ask them questions, they'll talk about it. But when it comes down to pressure from internal, like sales targets, quotas, they're behind the numbers. All of a sudden, a lot of that goes out the window. And I don't think that they put that into practice as much as they understand the concept. And I'm sure you've seen this too. Why do you think that's happening?
Oh, it's I mean, It's a leadership problem for sure. Anytime somebody is doing something, is feeling pressured to do something, behave, sell in a way that doesn't feel natural to them, and they know is not the best practice. If they don't have a voice to make that heard, like if I'm buying, if think, put yourself in the founder's position or the president or the director of sales or whoever it is, they hire somebody on their team. The vast majority of the people that I work with will have a couple salespeople, but they're hiring their first salespeople. Those are my clients typically. And so what they're really saying is, I don't have time as the founder to do the sales anymore. Well, if you hire a salesperson and now you say, by the way, I know you're the expert. This is all you do all day long, but I don't want you doing it that way anymore. I want you to do it my way. It's a leadership problem. It's a humility problem. And so I think that when you start to get into these specialized roles, when the business grows big enough that you do need sales reps or do need a marketing person on site or whatever the specialized role is, the founder always wants to hire a person who's better at it than them. And first of all, if you don't do that, you've probably made a mishire. But then secondly, you need to then trust the person that you just hired. So I think a lot of people bring anxiety. Sales is extremely performative, and you either make the sale or you don't, and there's a lot of pressure there. It's different than marketing. Marketing, I think there's a little bit more room. There's a little bit better understanding that this is a process. Sales is, most people are thinking direct line sales, push as hard as you can, move as fast as you can. That's a lot of pressure. It's performative. And if you have a bad day, it's just, so much of it is driven by how you feel that day. So I think what you're describing is a leadership problem more than anything.
Yeah, I think leadership, and quite frankly, a lot of times people get into organizations and and it comes back to leadership, but they don't necessarily feel like they don't feel comfortable doing things their own way. They're going into the training meetings. They're being told by their boss it has to be done this way. We've got this process. And so it creates this apprehension. And quite frankly, when marketing is coming at the internal messaging one way and sales is not necessarily on board with it, because you and I both seen this. It's like
Oh yes.
marketing comes up with a great concept. They roll it out. They're saying, hey, this is our new message. Salespeople try it a couple times, falls flat. And
Right.
all of a sudden they shift back to their old messaging. And then somebody's like, well, nobody's using the new messaging. This happens so often. I think one of the biggest challenges beyond leadership is the fact that marketing and sales in a lot of organizations, they butt heads when they really should be aligned. If you look at the
Correct.
Merriam-Webster definition of marketing, everything you read sounds like sales, but you wouldn't know it in organizations.
Right. Well, and I think Paul, that there's also an issue that we get things mixed up. So we so when you work with founders, what happens is if you work with a successful founding business, they're very often very sales forward, right? So the founder is able to succeed off of the sheer force of his will and his
Hmm.
personal network, and they're able to grow to a certain point, and then they stall. And at that point, he often will think, or she will often think, oh, we need to add marketing because marketing will fill the leads. When really the problem is they don't have the architecture underneath.
Yeah.
But sometimes you find these founders who are more marketing led, and they don't understand that there's a difference between an MQL and an SQL. The MQL is a marketing qualified lead. A sales qualified lead is a different thing, and there should be a continuation between the two pipelines. But most people think in terms of one pipeline or another. They think in terms of the sales pipeline, the book of business, or they think
Yeah.
in terms of the customer journey, which is typically the marketing journey. And probably most companies would be well served to think more holistically across both. But you're right, it does take a lot of coordination and collaboration between the two teams.
Yeah.
They have to get along. They have to. So you need to make space of that for that.
Yeah, and it does seem like top of funnel is the area that's easy to talk about, right? It's like, oh, we need more leads, we need more people coming in, but that isn't always the answer. You and I both come from a mindset of relationship building. And, you look at sales statistics today, it takes between 7 and 13 touch points to go from prospect to buyer. That's massive. I mean, back in the old days, it used to be 5 to 6 touch points. Now it's like 7 to 13, and it's probably more likely on the 13. We all know that people aren't necessarily answering the phones like they once did. So this idea that we are going, okay, more leads, let's work those leads. Salespeople are making 1 or 2 attempts and they're moving on to the next name on the list.
Mm-hmm.
When the reality is the really good salespeople are nurturing the heck out of those relationships, and they're building trust, and they're over time playing the long game. CRMs, slide decks, inboxes. Sales teams don't need more scattered tools. They need alignment. Collavia brings your sales playbook, AI coaching, training, and goals together in one platform for consultative B2B teams looking to close more deals with less confusion and greater consistency. Collavia, enabling buying in a world of selling. Visit Collavia.com. So talk a little bit about this idea that it's not always just about leads, is it?
No, it's not about leads. Not necessarily about leads. It's about the architecture underneath all of that anyways. I mean, there are ways to get leads. You can get leads. They can be bad leads, but depending on the business, the role of marketing is to build a framework of trust. That's what you're trying to do. When I think about that whole growth system in 4 stages. I think of it about positioning, which is how are we going to build trust with whom, where, that kind of thing. That's positioning. So that creates sort of the base framework for our trust. Then you go to marketing. Marketing is building trust before the sale. Sales is capitalizing on trust. So it's turning trust, it's converting trust into a sale. But then you've got a 4th piece that is highly neglected, and that is going to lifetime value and looking at either existing clients or past clients and re-engaging them. And typically, and that's great because that reignites trust, right? It's saying we already have a relationship. It went well the first time, hopefully. So let's re-engage, and we're either gonna sell you something new that you need or that can help you, or we're going to ask you for referrals, introductions to people who are more interested in buying from us as well, and so we can continue that lifespan. But that is highly relational. That's very, very relational. And with a small business that has stalled, if you're in a revenue crunch right now and you need a strategy to kind of give yourself a shot in the arm, go to lifetime value every time. Go ask for referrals every time. I just looked at I don't have a high volume of clients, but yesterday I was meeting with the sales coach, actually 2 of them in one day. And I realized, so I'd done some homework and I realized, man, the last 10 or 12 of my last clients have only 2 of them didn't come from a referral or an introduction. Just 2 of them.
And it's funny. At one time, Tom, I used to believe that if you're running a referral-based model, you're in trouble. But today, I think referrals are going to they're the equity. That's where the real gold is. And because there's so much noise in the marketplace, buyers are starting to tune out a lot of sales messaging because, it's like AI has added to that mix, and companies are trying to automate processes, which means we're not necessarily creating these really engaging personal messages up front, trying to open these doors. But you said something that really stands out to me. So I have a recent client experience where one of the talking points of one of the owners, he goes, "Oh, well, we got a huge database. We've got so many people in our database. We don't need leads." And I'm like, "That's great." Started talking to him, talking about the process, and we were looking at this, and I brought up lapsed clients, and he goes, yeah, we have, somebody should be reaching out to those lapsed clients. And I'm like, wait, that's not part of this. So what's this database for? And he goes, well, we don't really use it right now. He says, but it's there. And he goes, the salespeople can be going through it. And I thought, wow, this is like a major disconnect. So you've got the database, you don't need leads, but nobody's really working the database you have. I think that's more common than we think. I think that's
Well,
a real challenge.
I think it's very common. I have about 6 business cards right now that have sat on my desk for a month, and I keep looking at them going, "I gotta call those people. I gotta call them."
Yeah.
And there's always something more urgent that comes up, and that's terrible. Um, so, y I mean, it depends on the volume that you need and what you're selling and stuff like that, but truthfully, like, you cannot afford, it doesn't matter if you're a solopreneur or a $100 million manufacturing business, you cannot afford to let those relationships go cold. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
And you can't allow your pipelines to go stale. There's always got to be some sort of an infill tool to keep more prospects coming in.
I want to step back to the bottleneck concept because there's a book called Ready, Fire, Aim, which, if you've read it, is a great read about how once companies grow to a certain size, there's a reason that certain structures have to be put in place. It's like small companies don't really have middle management, but once you get to a certain size, you need that. Then you scale and you have different levels and different hierarchies in organizations. Large publicly traded companies obviously have a lot of hierarchy, maybe to a fault. But when we look at companies where there is a bottleneck, small companies are notorious. Growing small companies, the owner, he or she was the person that was doing all the outreach, and then they brought in salespeople, but they hate to get their hands out of that process. What do we do when we see that there's a bottleneck within an organization? When you're the leader and it's happening, that's one thing. But what do we do as workers in that company when we see that bottleneck is holding us back? Because it creates a lot of negative energy. Have you seen anything that works to help kind of diffuse that?
You know what? I had a conversation with a client this morning where I'm, more of a fractional. So I'm
Hmm.
I'm a little more on the staff than I am if I'm just, consulting. And I brought up an issue that I saw. Now I'm fairly new to this company, and I said I want to bring this up to plant a seed for a conversation down the road. Well, I brought it up and it actually started the conversation. And I just realized it doesn't matter. He disagreed with me. I suggested we should, bring some of our offices together into one location as opposed to being spread out and stuff like that. And he says, no, and this is why. And so he's clearly been in there for 10, 15 years running this business. He's been thinking about it. The guy is brilliant. He's a brilliant, brilliant leader. So I'm getting context as I'm listening. Now, for the leader, you have to have humility to listen because there could be some wisdom in the room that you hadn't considered. And so you have to be willing to take off your bias, take off your historical thinking and go, okay, do I need to like reopen that and reconsider it? But for me as the employee, so to speak, I already feel freedom to speak my mind like that and go, this seems really weird to me. Like, why are you doing it this way? And but then after I've put it out there, it's not my company to run. So if the leader wants to be a bottleneck, and you're recognizing that and you're saying something about it and they're not responding to it,
Hmm.
you have to be willing to back off and not let that scare you from bringing up other stuff or you know um yeah, I mean, you just eventually you just have to it's called leading up. Leading down, easiest to do. Leading horizontally to peers is challenging, but it can work. Leading up is the hardest thing to do. And it takes a lot of patience and humility to be able to do it.
It does, and it also creates a desire, or not even a desire, a need to create a culture around that. And I think that's the missing component in a lot of organizations. I mean, I think there's plenty of people out there that would love to be able to speak up, but they feel like the minute they do, they're getting their hands slapped. And
Right.
I think that's also a bigger challenge. On a smaller scale, I was working with a client a few years ago that was in a very specialized area, and they were about, I would say, probably 70 employees. Then they had some part-time staff, and they had probably 5 salespeople. And the salespeople were, a lot of the work they did was inside sales, but they would also go out and do outside sales, and they'd set up meetings. The president of the company refused to let the salespeople go do a presentation if he wasn't there. And I was working with him and I said, listen, I said, why would you do that? I said, you're holding your people back. Well, I think it makes us look like we really, you know, put a lot of personal care and they get to meet with the president of the company. And it's like, it makes us look like we really take care of them. I said, you know what it makes you look like? It makes you look really small. And I said, you're operating from a very small mindset. I said, that's, you're holding your people back for one thing. But I said, do you think your clients really feel like they have to meet with the president to feel like they're accomplishing something? I said, your team could be doing 10 times more of the meetings and you don't have to be on the road constantly. I said, and your way of thinking, I said, is really holding you back. And it's like, at first, I think he wanted to get his feelings hurt and get upset. But he realized right then and then he'd been thinking serve, serve, serve. This is how I serve. When in reality, he was the biggest barrier. And once he got out of the way, their company blew up. They ended up selling about a
Right.
year later because they had massive growth because he got out of the process.
You know, I mean, this is becoming a leadership discussion. I
Yeah,
think
it kind of
so
is.
much rises and falls on leadership. And this is I care a lot about leadership. So my past is as a is a pastor, 20 years in ministry, okay? And in a very large church. We had 4,500 people, 80 staff. I was not the senior leader, but I was a senior leader within the church. And at one point I had 17 staff under me, and we had 1,500 kids in our ministries and about 300 400 volunteers that we were managing. I understand organizational leadership. I really understand it. And in a nonprofit like that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the context is, if it's spiritual or not. The the leader, the leader who is wired to kind of know everybody will automatically limit the growth of that organization. It's like almost intentional, but it could be subconscious as well. But you know, they're really interested in knowing their people, right? And so you think about a boss like that, a CEO like that, very interested in having a high touch, knowing their customers, giving. And I think what you have to do is you have to have a conversation where you go, look, we need to just say what this means for you.
Mhm.
If you are happy where you are, there is nothing wrong with staying here. Like this whole we have to grow or we're dying mentality is just not true. What you have to do is you have to be adding new people and stuff like that. But there's nothing wrong with having a healthy business and keeping it at $5 million and that's where you're making your money. That's fine. But if you want to grow, that's a different conversation
Yeah.
because it's the leader's skills that are going to cap the growth of that organization every single time. And I can almost guarantee you that the number one um, mindset that the leader has to have is one of humility. Almost every time. If you cannot have a humble, if you are, and humble does not mean weak. I think that's a horrible misrepresentation of what the word means. Humble means you're teachable, that you're a team player, that you actually care about your staff and you put other, you pay well and you, or fairly, I should say, you treat them fairly. But if you're, so many leaders are holding back their own growth and they say they want to grow, but they actually don't know what they're saying. They don't
Yeah.
mean that because they don't understand all the consequences of what they're dreaming about.
Yeah, I love that. And look, the idea that a leader is someone who just you know charges ahead and he guides everyone down the right path. I think the best leaders are the ones who find the people that have strengths and abilities and they want to shine and being able to step out of the way. And that humility is such an important piece. Obviously, you mentioned team
Well,
player. That's
yeah,
so
and
powerful.
this doesn't diminish the role and the
Mm,
incredible critical importance of the leader. But think about it this: if you're a founder in particular, um, you need to be actually a business generalist. So you need to be good at marketing. You need to be good at sales. You need to be good at operations. You need to be good at finances. But there comes a point where you're going to be able to hire specialties. So if you're a generalist, you actually lay the foundation for all the other pieces of the business, the functions of the business. And then the goal is to hire somebody in the marketing role that is better than you, but can build on your foundation. So the founder is legitimately, truthfully, a foundation layer, and the success of their foundation is going to be what propels the person in that role to greatness. And
Yeah.
imagine if you're a generalist and now you've added specialists in all of these areas, your business, your line is going to go from here to here, because you're not withholding, and you're still going to have to keep laying tracks and keeping everybody organized. But yeah, you're actually not going to be the best marketer anymore, and you're not going to be the best salesperson anymore, and you're not going to be the best operations person anymore. And that's actually the goal of a really healthy business, is to find those specialists who can take over and build on the foundation that you've laid.
Yeah, it makes me think of the famous story of Henry Ford and how he didn't always profess to be the person who had all the answers. Like, he saw his staff as, pre-internet, but they were his search engine. It's like if he needed expertise in an area, he wanted somebody on staff that could answer that. And it's like that idea of being able to leverage your team. It's so powerful. Well, Tom, I want to take advantage of thanking you, but I also want to take advantage of one area of your expertise as we close this out. We've only got a couple
Yeah.
minutes left. But one area that I think a lot of companies maybe misunderstand, misuse, is the idea of storytelling. And storytelling
Mm.
is something that, I had an uncle that I always thought he was one of the most engaging people. And part of that was he was an amazing storyteller. He would suck you in, he would capture your attention. And brands can do that. Individuals can do that. Salespeople can do that. Can you give us something on storytelling as we close this out?
Yeah. I think the key to storytelling is understanding that life is lived in 3 acts on repeat. There's 3 acts to your life that you're literally in right now. So the first act is disruption. Something has happened, something that you want, you couldn't get it, you fall into a hole, the metaphorical hole. Then you have a confrontation. So disruption, then confrontation. You're confronted with a possible solution. Somebody comes and drops a ladder in. The ladder takes effort, though. It takes price, or it costs you something. And so you're disrupted, then you're confronted with an option to get out of that hole. And if you take it, you're transformed. So disruption, confrontation, transformation. I think a lot of great businesses are in are have an audience that knows they're disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
They know their life is disrupted, and they haven't been confronted with the right option yet, the right truth yet, and they haven't had a picture of transformation painted yet. So that's a problem, because many people won't transform. They'll just stay in that place and they'll just wallow in their disruption. The brands that have the hardest time are those that are on the forefront of technology and stuff like that, where they're bringing something to market that people don't even know that they need yet. So they have to intentionally disrupt. And that can be quite difficult. But if you think about it just in those terms: disruption, confrontation, transformation, and and you realize that everybody is in that pattern all the time, and now you start to think about, what is our marketing process? What is our sales system? How does it address the disruption, confrontation, transformation? How do we help people out of that place that they're in so that they can become who they truly want to be? If you start thinking in those terms, that's what we mean by story-based marketing or narrative marketing. It's really important that you don't think of stories as storytelling. Nobody cares about the origin story of your business. Nobody. They want to know whether you can help them out of the pit that they found themselves in. That's what they want to know. They don't care that
Yeah.
your grandpa started the company back in 1934, and nobody cares. They want to know if that ladder that you're offering them is actually strong enough, sturdy enough, and worth investing in to get to the promised transformation. It takes a lot of faith in the person dropping down the ladder. to climb that ladder and see if the transformation is real. But so this is powerful because we have evolved to recognize the world in these patterns. And so when we latch onto those patterns in our marketing or our sales, we're going to be latching onto a very powerful survival mechanism that we've evolved to have. So that's really what I mean by storytelling. Yeah. And that alone, bring that up in your next sales meeting.
Yeah.
Are people disrupted, or are we trying to disrupt them? What are they confronted with? How are we confronting them? And are we painting a picture of transformation that we're inviting them into? That will actually add a lot to your sales process right there.
Amazing. I've been in that hole, and that ladder's actually hit me on the head, but I was able to get out. So,
Nice.
Thom, amazing. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to be respectful of your time. Can you tell people how they can connect with you, and if you want to share your LinkedIn or whatever? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is spelled. You can probably see it in the notes on the episode, but it's Thom Van Dycke. So it's Thom with an H. Van Dyke is spelt a little bit uniquely, but just if you search me on LinkedIn, that's a great way to find me. My website is thomvandyke.com, so you can find me that way. And I'm more than happy to connect with anybody in the audience, jump on a call, talk about how things are going. It's my pleasure. And so thanks for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. You're amazing. I knew this would be great. Great conversation, a lot of insights. And we could have talked for a few more hours, but I want to thank you again, Thom Van Dycke, for being on the Enabling Buying podcast.